Chapter 5. Closing the deal. The world ended not with a bang, but with the sterile chime of the intercom on Alara's desk. It was 8:50 a.m. She was nursing a strong black coffee, the ghost of Liam's touch still a phantom heat on her skin from the night before, when her assistant's voice, tight with panic, crackled through the speaker. "S. Vance, you need to turn on the financial news network now." Alara's fingers trembled as she remotely started the large screen mounted on her office wall. The familiar red and white ticker was a river of blood running across the bottom of the screen. Her company's stock symbol, VNC, was at the front of the parade, followed by a terrifying red arrow pointing straight down. The NC Plu, Mem es 22% on Li Eat in term. Mem o Alaging R&DF Arud, letter hype Chrysalis. The memo. A preliminary worst cases Zencho draft she had commissioned 3 months ago, locked in a secure server. A document only 5 people should have had access to, one of whom was Marcus Thorne. The news anchor's voice was a vulture's cry, speaking of shareholder panic and calling into question Alara's leadership. It was a perfectly executed corporate assassination. Her phone began to scream, a cacophony of calls from her board, her PR team, her legal counsel. The market was a bloodbath, and she was a sacrifice. Before she could even form a response, an official email landed in her inbox. Subject: Emergency board meeting and vote of no confidence. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. Marcus hadn't just wounded her, he'd gone for the kill. He had used her own diligence against her, twisting a confidential stress test into a public narrative of failure. The door to her office opened and Liam walked in. He held a tablet, his face a mask of cold fury. The calm he projected was a stark island in her raging sea of panic. He used a ghost server in the Cayman Islands to leak it, Liam said, his voice cutting through the noise in her head. Untraceable. But the Mactio signature on the file format is unique to the executive-level terminals. He's sloppy. Alara stared at him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sloppy or not, he's won. Liam, the stock is in freefall. They're calling for my head. Let them call, he said, his gray eyes locking onto hers. He walked around her desk and stood beside her, his presence a sudden, solid anchor. This isn't over. This is just the opening move. For the first time, Alara was not his conquest or his student. She was his partner. Forced into an alliance by the threat of mutual destruction, they became a single, focused entity. The next 18 hours were a blur of caffeine, adrenaline, and a professional synergy so intense it mirrored the raw chemistry that had ignited between them. They turned her office into a war room. Reports and data streams covered every surface. He was relentless, dissecting the market's reaction, modeling shareholder behavior, and identifying key institutional investors who could be swayed. She worked her network, her fingers flying across her phone, calling in favors, placating allies, and projecting an aura of unshakable confidence she was miles from feeling. They moved around each other with an unspoken understanding, finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. He'd point out a vulnerability in their defense, and she'd already be on the phone to legal to patch it. She'd ask for a specific data point, and he'd have it on screen before she finished a question. The corporate fixer and the ice queen, their minds working in a perfect, breathtaking tandem. Sometime around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally hit her. She slumped in her chair, pressing the heels of her hands into her burning eyes. "We're not going to make it," she whispered, the confession a bitter taste in her mouth. "The votes are already against us. Marcus has them." Alem stopped his pacing. He came over and gently pulled her hands from her face. He knelt before her just as he had the night before, but this time his touch was different. It was grounding, reassuring. "Look at me, Alara," he commanded softly. She did. The precatory fire in his eyes was banked, replaced by a steady, unwavering belief. "We are not going to lose." He didn't say you. He said we. In that moment, the lines blurred completely. He wasn't her co-o or her lover. He was her foxhole companion in the middle of a firefight. She reached out, her hand finding his, their fingers lacing together. It wasn't a gesture of passion but of allegiance, a silent pact made in the eye of the storm. The emergency board meeting felt like a public execution. Alara walked in with Lamb at her side, her head held high. The room was electric with hostility. The old guard looked at her with a mixture of pity and disappointment. Marcus Thorne, seated in his usual spot, looked like a king who had already won his crown, his face a mask of smug concern that was more insulting than open gloating. Alara made her case. She spoke with passion and precision, laying out the facts, exposing the leak for the malicious sabotage it was. She outlined the very recovery plan Lamb had drafted. But she could see it in their faces. It wasn't enough. Fear was a more powerful motivator than loyalty. "Thank you, Alara," the chairman said, his voice heavy with false regret. "We will now proceed to the vote." It was happening. She was losing her father's company, her legacy, everything. She could feel the stares, feel Marcus's triumphant smirk burning into her. The votes were tallied by a show of hands. One after another, they went up against her. 7, 8, 9. It was a landslide. The chairman cleared his throat to make the official announcement that would end her career. "Stop the count." The voice was quiet, but it sliced through the tension like a razor. Every head turned to Liam, who had remained standing silently at the back of the room. He walked forward, placing a slim leather portfolio on the gleaming table. Marcus scoffed. "You have no standing here, Sterling. This is a matter for the board." "On the contrary," Liam said, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Marcus with icy contempt. "It's a matter of ownership." He opened the portfolio. "Over the past 18 hours, while you were all panicking and selling, my private equity firm has been buying. You created a fire sale, Mr. Thorne. Thank you for that. It brought the price down to a number I found very attractive." He slid a document across the table to the stunned chairman. It was a statement of holdings, share block after share block, acquired through a dozen different shell corporations, all consolidating under a single holding company, Sterling Acquisitions. "As of 8:47 this morning," Liam announced, his voice ringing with absolute authority, "I became the majority shareholder of Vance Industries. I now hold 51% of all voting shares." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Marcus Thorne's face went from smug to ashen white in a single sickening moment. He looked as if Liam had physically struck him. This is impossible," he stammered. "It's not," Liam said. "The full predatory force of the Closer Unleash. It's what's known as a hostile takeover. Something you might have learned about if you'd spent less time plotting coups and more time reading your financial briefs." He turned to the chairman. "The vote of no confidence is void. This meeting is adjourned. In fact, all of you are dismissed. Your tenures on this board are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." It was a massacre, clean, brutal, and total. One by one, the titans of industry, the men who had judged her moments before, were rendered powerless. Marcus was the last to leave, his face a contorted mask of hatred and disbelief as two security guards flanked him. His war was over. He had lost catastrophically. Soon, the room was empty. The silence that descended was absolute. It was just her and Lem, standing in the wreckage of the old Vance Industries. He had saved her. He had destroyed her. He owned her company. He owned everything. He walked toward her, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The fight was over, but the final negotiation was just beginning. He stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable. "You played me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact." "I invested in you," he corrected, his voice low and intense. "I saw the company's greatest asset from the moment I walked into your office." He reached out, not to touch her, but to straighten the collar of her jacket, a gesture of unnerving intimacy in the vast, empty boardroom. "The acquisition is complete," he said, his gray eyes holding hers captive. "But there is one final merger proposal to consider." He paused, the air crackling with the weight of everything that had happened between them, the interview, the desk, the stolen moments, the Lacanite battles. "This one, Alara, is between you and me, and its terms are non-negotiable."